Hey, welcome to Leadership Within, the moment for leaders to reflect on their human experience of leadership. I'm your host, TK, and I'm joined by
Vanessa.
Hey, Vanessa, thank you for coming, and I'm excited about this episode. Hope you're having a great week.
Yeah, no, it's a nice week. Thank you very much.
And I'm hoping that our listeners are always and also having the time. We usually publish that on Sunday, so that's hopefully a good day for you to have like a listen in to our reflections. Because today we're going to talk about something that's, I think, difficult for many people. Which is, okay, so, I'm going to tell you a story, right? It's actually not my story, but a lot of people I work with are first-time managers. And this is like a key moment for a great many people. It has been a key moment for me. So I remember, and there's go with the story, oh my God, so long ago, they were, my employers at the time were building a team. And I was working with two more people, and they wanted to send us on like a separate mission to get something done. And they needed someone to lead this team. And there were murmurings as to, that might be happening. So they were thinking about, who should be the leader? And I've thought about that, but I didn't want to like straight on step up to lead the team that, were my peers at the time, because I thought, well, that's dishonest. Why me, right? It was like, so I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask them if we can take turns in leading. Yeah, that was quite some time ago. At that time, I thought it was a good idea. But what happened is, before I managed to get this idea in, our current boss at the time came in and said, yep, TK is going to be the leader of this team. And I went from there. So my thing is, and I think a lot of people share this particular feeling in the story, it is very difficult for people to step out of just being a peer or a mate and transition to a role of a manager. It just feels like this is one of the major challenges for first-time managers. And I would like to talk about that today and ask you, Vanessa, if you have any experiences, so people that had these experiences, if there's anything to share there.
Well, I've had this experience, although I wouldn't say necessarily that I was a mate. But I suppose it depends how you define mate. But I've had
I guess so, right? Not my name, but someone said it, so it sounds cool.
Yeah, I've had the experience where I have the person that recruited me into the organization. I ended up being her boss, and that was kind of strange. Because I suppose there's a lot of navigating for safety in that as you kind of move from one role to another. And it's funny because when you were talking, you used the word dishonest. I don't know if you recognized that you used it. And I was kind of like, gosh, that's interesting. Say some more.
So I definitely will, because I've been thinking about this problem quite a bit, and, helping first-time managers, I have developed a way of thinking about that. And I would like to invite you to maybe share an opinion on that, because, I haven't seen that being discussed in this way much. Well,
okay, hit me with that.
So there you go, right? So what it is as human beings, we obviously form relationships, but we also form unspoken relationships. So they are, let's call them relationship patterns, right? We're friends, some people are obviously romantic partners, co-workers, members of the same religious congregation, whatever it is, right? So it comes with a lot of sometimes unspoken, often unwritten rules and trust, levels of relationship, levels of, dare I say, intimacy, and levels of, collaboration, whatever it might be. Sometimes even levels of vulnerability. Now, what doesn't happen that often is when people shift these relationships, right? So the example of a peer to manager is a good one. So I think what happens, and I've seen it, and you probably might want relate to some of this experience, is the fact that when you're a peer with someone, there's a degree of camaraderie, trust, common interests. But when someone accepts a management promotion, now they have to navigate a different relationship. They have to obviously also represent the company. I'm not obviously saying that the manager shouldn't care for the employee, not at all. But, and I will use this word purposefully, for many people, this shift feels like a betrayal. Like a betrayal of trust, because, oh my God, you've been a part of this group, you've been a part of this relationship pattern we had as, peers, mates, colleagues, team members, whatever you want to call the team, and now you're in a different team. Oh, I think even though people don't often use these words, that might be something they feel.
Yeah, I can see that. And so what you're talking about is navigating the emotional landscape.
I do, but then again, I think the first part is how do we identify what's happening, right? That's true. We need that's obviously a part of the navigation. I'm definitely talking about that. But for many people, they feel, and you've said it, they feel strange, but I can't put a finger on it. This is something that feels awkward, which is, again, as we were talking, in my mind, emotional pain, right? The really heavy sign that something's wrong. I just think like we have a natural instinct, the way we evolved, not to rock the boat, not to betray people in this kind of manner. Yet, we sometimes have to step up to lead. So that's how it feels for many people that I talk with. And I'm wondering, like, with the leaders you work with or with your own experiences, how would you identify and describe this difficulty, this emotional field that you have to navigate when, moving to a management position and managing people that you've been peers with?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe if I think about it, probably emotionally torn would be the right word. So a part of me that's been your colleague and your mate, and we've gone down the pub maybe and we've socialized, or I've told you what I think about certain people, and I felt quite safe to do that because you've got no power over me.
Of course.
Suddenly you now have power, whether that's, positional power or, a budgetary power or whatever. I think that's the challenge. So like, oh, maybe I've told you secrets. Maybe I've told you what I really think. Now you've got all that information to hand.
And from the point of view of the manager, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking from the colleague point of view. That's how I might think, and therefore, but also from the manager, I kind of think maturity is something that's really important, isn't it? As you step from one role to another, having the maturity to recognize it and kind of go, you know what, things are shifting. Let's talk about that. I think is really important. But I think sometimes if in your new position you feel like, oh, I've got to now prove myself, I've got to step up, I've got to distance myself, I've got to whatever, and you have this idea of who you now need to be, that can feel really weird, because I think it's all about your relationship to power. And as a manager, you have new powers, you might have new ranks. How do I recognize, deal with that, talk to that, versus pretend like nothing's changed?
And, there's a third dimension here, which is what possibly could have happened is more people might have applied for this power in the team. And yet, the manager has been chosen. So there's like a third one. But
that's always awkward.
It is, right? So again, awkwardness, in my mind, emotional pain. So we've got all these dimensions, but I'm really interested in what you said about the relationship with power and discovering that. I'm wondering if there's like a story or, if you can help our listeners understand more what is difficult about having the right relationship, and if you've seen people that struggled with that.
Well, so if I give my own experience of when I said to you, I worked with someone who then I ended up managing, and the context of within which we were working was the organization was moving in a different direction, and this person didn't really feel on board. But they were it's almost like they had golden handcuffs because, they had a lot of service. They were waiting for their pension to come out. So they wanted to move on, but they couldn't, or they felt they couldn't. And now suddenly I'm the person they're complaining to. It's just like, oh my God. And I think what I learned through that process was to have adult conversations. I really grew through those conversations because I had a coach at the time, and they were, I was saying, I'm just so frustrated. All they do is moan at me. I don't know, what can I do about this? I'm powerless. I can't get my boss to suddenly pay someone off, and I felt like the kind of meat in between the sandwich, and I was holding everything. And having a coach really helped me have a conversation that was adult with this person. So even though I might be the manager, to say, yes, this is the reality. There aren't payoffs. There aren't, you are going to have, you need to make a choice. This is what's on option here. And the rest is down to you. And just what I learned was sometimes you have to keep saying the same thing for someone to hear it. You might have to say it in different ways, but to help someone self-empower sometimes and to equalize in the relationship, I had to not let this colleague or this ex-colleague give me all the power and kind of go, it's all on you. Because actually, I get that there's a role of manager, and we are still equal in our humanity and being human and knowing what's important to us and navigating according to that. So I think the power dynamic is really tricky. I think, sometimes we've got these old references of, oh, well, you're the boss, so now therefore now, I'm going to throw everything up to you, and I'm going to sit and be belligerent, can happen. And I think all of this is such an amazing opportunity to have a conversation.
It is. Although what's really interesting, and thank you for sharing that, because it's quite pertinent to the work I'm doing. And recently, working with a group of very senior leaders on like the notion of power and why they feel so difficult with that. But what struck me in your story is something that I think has also been my experience. It probably is an experience of great many first-time managers when they've just been promoted. On one hand, there's this, let me say, resentment of power from the people that don't have it, right? They didn't get the ability to be promoted. They didn't get chosen. From the person that has been promoted, as in, oh my God, well, there's so much responsibility. I now have this P thing, the power, and what do I do with that? How do I deal with this item? But interestingly, the realization that, especially as a first-time manager, in very many cases, in very many environments, you have very little power at all. Right? So on one hand, you're getting the short end of the stick from both sides. It's a double whammy, and it's such a difficult thing to navigate. You've said talking helps, but how? With whom?
Well, I think transparency is always something that I try to navigate by, can I be clear? And what I see persistently around internal appointments is a lack of open dialogue about why did that person get it and that person didn't, and I sometimes feel like we give out these platitudes. Well, they had this, and you just think, oh, come on, you're just, and I just feel there's not enough real talk, and that's what then creates all this drama, because we're not really being upfront with people around their behaviors or their attitudes or, whatever it is that we've made that selection process on. So for me, there's always this piece about, if we can be open and transparent, even though it's uncomfortable. And I keep looking at conflict keeps coming up for me a
Mm-hmm.
lot lately, and I'm putting together a program around conflict because I feel like that's what we're talking about here. We've got different points of view. I've got, if I'm the person that's not been promoted, I might be thinking, this is shit. It's not fair. I've been here longer, whatever. I might have attitudinal issues. I might have a whole load of, one of the ones that I really hate when I talk to women who come from a particular ethnic group where they will say, oh, I feel like I'm the token person that got the job. It's just, there's so much bad feeling for everybody. And I, if our processes are rigorous enough, which they should be, to really qualify the right people, then I think we all deserve conversation around why them, why not me, how I feel about that, and how I'm going to get beyond my feeling of that. And I think that's when it's really hard. If you're stepping into a new management role, you don't necessarily have the coaching skill set to do that.
No.
And do we give resources to help people adjust around that? Because I think there's a pivotal moments where you can really step into empowerment or you can step into victimhood.
Yes, it's obviously dramatic, and it will get people, if you've listened to one of our previous episodes, to step somewhere in the triangle. But okay, let's maybe talk about the real talk, as you say. Talk about like why is it difficult, or at least the experience I find really stops people. So it's similar to possibly giving people feedback when, unfortunately, not progressing with them in, I don't know, a recruitment scenario, right? When you're trying to interview a person, it's the same with a situation when you're giving someone negative feedback, or even you're letting someone go. You're right. Theoretically, we should be open and transparent about it. But let's analyze the scenario. And again, I'll share my story. Maybe it will put me in a positive light, but maybe it will give people, our wonderful listeners, an insight as to what happened. So I remember back in, I think 2017, I had a situation when I've been contracting at a bank. And at one point, the person that was, my contact at the bank, the person that owned my contract, aka my boss, she called me to a meeting and said that they will not renew me at the end of the month. Well, essentially letting me go. Right, and I've asked why, and she gave me reasons. I wasn't, doing that, and they needed that, and so on. Valid reasons. But then again, this situation came as I guess it always comes as a bit of a surprise, dare I say shock. So I started saying, well, but I can do these things, and this and that, and why. And then after like a minute of unloading, maybe I wasn't too emotional about it. I thought, well, but I can do these things. Well, we this and that. I said, she was silent. I looked at her and I said, oh, I'm bargaining. I should stop. And she said, yes. And I said, thank you. I mean, I'm quite proud of that moment.
Yeah.
But then again, she stood it. But I could probably think that at this particular moment, she had to, oh my God, I'll have to have a long discussion with this guy. He was quite experienced, so she definitely managed. And I thankfully managed to get myself into a position that I reflected on, what the hell am I doing, right? It's, that's her decision. But not everyone is able to do that. And as a manager, you will have to now get this storm of excuses, anger, expressed in different ways. So I'm not surprised that it's difficult to be transparent. It's much easier to just, not give people feedback, be covert, give them a cardboard box and escort them out of the door, which I've seen happen. I've worked in an investment bank. So how do we, and the challenge is for you, Vanessa, encourage people to take the leap into transparency as managers?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think that's us doing our internal work with ourselves, isn't it? Because, without being a broken record, it will all go back to our attachment patterns as children, and all of that playing out, and our self-esteem and self-worth and all sorts of other things. So, I think, how do we do it? I think we get skilled around it, and we get skilled. I think for a manager stepping in, what are the skills that they need to up level in? So typically, there may be strategic skills, decision making, critical analysis, those kind of things, and technical skills. But I think it's the first point where you start to think, okay, it's the relational, social, emotional skills that I'm going to need the most help with. They're the things that are going to tie up most of my time. Because when they don't go right, or there's difficulty, it can cost us a lot of energy. So for me, I think it's recognizing what is my ability levels. I saw this Tom Cruise video, and he was saying,
"That's interesting, right?"
I know. Right, so it's going on Insta at the moment, and he basically is saying, he sets a goal, and then he works out what are the skills, what are the things that he needs to do to achieve that goal, and then he has to crawl before he can run, or walk, crawl before he can run before he can sprint. And I just want to sprint. I mean, let's face it. Most of us, when we get the title of manager, we kind of want to go, okay, I got the title. And I think being willing to be a learner and to be curious through that first line journey is so critical, because I think if we go in and we keep our defenses high and our wall, around us, really tight, then it's really hard, because we aren't looking at where we need to grow. And for me, when I step, I mean, if I'm kind of like, what advice, in fact, let me ask you this, what advice would you give your younger self around when you first stepped into management? What would you say to yourself, knowing what you know now?
There's a lot, I think, and I've been thinking about it quite a lot, and there's it's never thought about distilling into one thing.
Yeah, okay. So,
but no, I'll try on this one, and maybe our listeners, you'd actually resonate with that. Think about, okay, so this is young TK. I will say this, like, imagine that, you have this experience now. You have the problems you have right now. And I'm talking to my younger self, but I'm also talking to you, our listeners, if you're in this situation. Imagine a situation where you have this role, you'll progress. Nothing ever lasts forever. Your life will be different. It will change. It will evolve. You'll go places. You'll switch jobs. You'll do different kinds of things in your life. You probably won't stay there. Imagine yourself in like 10 years. And in 10 years, without the employee to manager relationship, without maybe even the employment relationship, you meet your team members. You meet the people that report to you. You also meet your bosses. And the advice I would give myself, and possibly to you, is that you meet this group and everyone smiles and everyone has positive, praises you for the work you've done. That at the end of the day, you've created something. You've been a good manager for your employees, for the company. You've done things that have paid in the long term. Always have the longer perspective. Problems come in and out. There is always the immediacy of what happens at any particular moment. But 5-10 years from now, you will remember how you've made people feel. You will remember the results you've achieved. And it's just important to have this long-term view, because the life is long as it is. That's not really practical advice, but damn, it paid off. I've met these people 10 years and 5 years after, and I was so happy to see them smile. My best experience was when my current team, the one that I was working with, met my old team from 5 years ago. And they were, sharing banter about me. But Yeah, it nearly drove me to tears that I wasn't as awful of a manager I thought that was.
Sounds like you gave yourself a hard time.
I always do, Vanessa. You know that about me, and I probably our listeners know that too.
Yeah.
What about yourself? What advice would you give to younger Vanessa when she first started as a leader?
Yeah, I think I would say slow down and notice what your relationship to pressure is. Because I think that's probably the biggest thing that I have to constantly work is finding my grounding, carving out my space, putting, just not being at the mercy of what everybody else is wanting or doing or, and so I think if I was to go back in time, I'd say trust yourself. You've got everything that you need, and just slow down and take it a step at a time. Because I think when you slow down, you can really see what's my part in this, or so I was just thinking. Sometimes I will say things like, "Oh, this conversation feels really awkward," and my supervisor will say, "To you or to them?" And I'm like, "Well, to me, right? It feels awkward to me." And it's like, "Okay, so what's that about?" I'm like, "Oh God." And sometimes what I've noticed is that in the awkwardness that I can feel when I can see someone else's what looks like discomfort or frustration or whatever, the temptation can be for me to step in. And I think if I was to have the wisdom I have now, it's like, don't step in, slow it down. This everybody's resourceful. It's all the stuff that we learn in basic 101 coaching.
Quite true.
Um, and I really do think first line managers absolutely get coaching skills underneath your belt. It's so, so helpful. Because I just think it gets you really understanding what listening is, what curiosity is, because I know for me, when the pressure's on, you can come from judgment really quickly. It gets you really able to help people do their own work. And so I think, yeah, I wished more organizations really invested in those kind of programs, those frontline programs, because I think it really, really helps. So in fact, I had someone ask me, they reached out to me the other day and they said, do you know someone that can help with redundancy training skills? And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
so what are you looking for? And is it the technical process of how do we handle the consultation period, etc., or what? And it's like, no, it's not that. They've got their own HR department. It's how do we cope with people's reactions? And there's a part of me thinks, oh, I could do that, but then I think, no, come on, stay focused in your lane, Vanessa. There's lots of things you can do, but is that where you want to put your energy? And I think it's such a lovely recognition from the request that, like, wow, these moments where someone's having a mental health issue, or someone's facing a redundancy or uncertainty, or someone's facing a disappointment in a recruitment process, or someone is facing something in their home life. These are the moments that I think make or break managers, and their impact. And I really feel like it's hard to repair damage that's done through, disconnection. It takes, it takes time to build that back. So my suggestion would be really invest in being able to have those open, considerate, empathetic, challenging conversations, and see it as a skill that you don't have if you don't have it. Because I definitely didn't have it, but I thought I could probably wing it.
We all think that until the drama starts happening, or
Oh my
we
God. And
actually
then you're
have
like,
to. Yeah.
get me out.
It's interesting, and you've said something very pertinent to me, which is like convincing organizations to invest in it, right? And it's something that is a livelihood, isn't it? And
Yeah.
when I think about that, is so many times speaking to people that theoretically empathize, who are able to see these problems, are able to see these investments that can be made, and maybe it's something that they can do, but so many people feel it's not their responsibility, and maybe
Or
it's
it's not
the
worth investing in,
oh
you
that's
know?
yeah. Do you
And
really care, right?
I just think, emotional intelligence and relational and social intelligence is so important. And the older I get, the more I realize it underpins everything, because as human beings, we're all just trying to get our needs met. And so, we only learn how to do that in our families of origin, and we may do that really constructively. Whoopie-dee if we do. But for so many of us, we've got passive aggressive or, aggressive defensive ways of doing it, that just don't help. And I always feel it's like life skills, conversational skills are so, so important. Because when you track back, where have things gone wrong, there are often earlier points where people could have spoken up.
Yes.
But they didn't feel they could.
There's the famous case of, I think, the Challenger space shuttle disaster. How it can really, but then again, not about anecdotes. Maybe the thing I would say is sometimes it's, difficult to convince people to invest in it. Maybe also because of the intangible nature of it, although obviously we show data, studies, and tell stories. But maybe, as you said, Vanessa, it's investing in yourself as a human, right? As I said, with my advice to my younger self. So they see you as a valuable human being, a boss, a manager, after all these years. So even if you're not supported, I guess if you're a listener on this podcast, you're well on your journey of investing in yourself as a human being. You'll always be yourself as a human being, and I guess it's one of the best investments you can make, even if it's not in money. At least, hopefully, it's in the time of listening to podcasts like this, listening to books or reading them, being with people that can help you get this perspective.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, I would just add on, the thought that occurred to me as you were saying that was, be clear with yourself about what performance means for you, like what great looks like. And because I think it isn't about hitting all the targets. You're going to have engagement, feedback, all sorts of different things. And, it's like, be clear with yourself. What are your measures for success? Because if we can be clear about, well, success isn't necessarily conflict avoidance. Success is, being able to dig in and have difficult conversations. Then then you can say to yourself, well, how good am I at doing that? Oh, well, actually, I could do with some help on that. I could do with some different thinking or some, practical help. I think it then gives you more of a starting point. So it's like almost like start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
And think about what would great in this role look like? What would I be doing? What would I be feeling? What would I be, in my being? How would I walk, talk, all those things, and then track back and say, okay, so what support might I need around that? And
with that, we'll leave you with this wonderful question. Hope to see you again in 2 weeks for our next episode of Leadership Within. Bye-bye.
Bye.